Kia ora team, and welcome to this, an introductory video to our new topic, speciation. Now, what is speciation? Well, throughout this topic you're going to come across a few new terms. They are as follows. So there you have it. Speciation is going to cover these things called species. You should remember that from earlier in your schooling. Things like gene flow, natural selection, sexual selection, mutations. There are two types of speciation that we're going to look at particularly, allopatric and sympatric. There are isolating mechanisms, prezygotic, postzygotic, gradualism, punctuated, and equilibrium, all of which we will unpack as we go through this topic. But first, I'm going to give you an overview of speciation. So sit back, make sure you're taking notes, and enjoy this introductory video to speciation. There are almost 10,000 known bird species on the planet. How did they evolve into so many unique forms? Take the birds of paradise, for example. With their dizzying array of colours, shapes and sizes, from the genetic evidence we know that the ancestors of all 39 species was a plain crow-like bird. And the process that caused this one species to split into many is called speciation. Before we explain speciation, let's talk about what we mean when we use the words species. According to the classic definition, species are groups of actually or potentially interbreeding natural populations, which are reproductively isolated from other groups. Speciation begins when groups become separated in space or become different enough in form and behaviour that individuals from one group no longer regularly mate with the individuals outside the group. One way for a new species to evolve starts when a few individuals colonise a new area that is outside their native range. Take for example a volcano. This island that rises out of the sea just off the coast of the mainland. Over 1 million years, as the island grows larger and less volcanically active, plants begin to grow. But there are no birds here yet. Then, one day, birds from a common species on the mainland are blown over by a storm and start a new population. If these birds move between the island and the mainland, only rarely, the conditions for reproductive isolation are set, and the brand new island population is on its way to becoming a new species. Over thousands of generations, the two populations will be shaped by natural and sexual selection into separate forms, each with a unique genetic fingerprint. But at what point are we confident that this island population has really changed enough to become a new species? Well, let's put our definition to the test. If we introduce a female from the mainland species to potential mates from the island, after 200 generations and isolation, about 400 years in bird terms, will they mate? It appears that these two still recognise each other as the same species. But how about after 1,000 generations of isolation? Now the female finds the island mate's birdsong a little bit strange, but she still chooses to mate with him. What if we fast forward again to 10,000 generations of isolation? This time, the female doesn't even recognise the male's song and is completely uninterested. if the female's mating preferences are widespread in the population, we now have two bona fide species, the mainland and the island. But these kinds of dating matchups don't actually happen in reality. Here, because our birds avoid flights across the open ocean, island birds do not regularly encounter the mainland birds. Because genes from the two populations no longer intermix, genetic differences accumulate and the two populations become different species. So in practice, scientists classify species separated in space by their genetic differences, not by observing blind dates. But there is another kind of speciation that can occur when a habitat becomes divided and a once widespread bird population becomes fragmented. Imagine as our new island grows larger over time and the volcano becomes a central mountain ridge while a valley forms along the eastern coast. Over time, the eastern birds, who have plentiful fruit resources and only need a single parent to successfully raise young, evolve specialized mating systems. Males compete for multiple mates, and, to get noticed, evolve fancy plumes and display behaviors. On the other side of the valley, the males evolve elaborate head plumes, and on the other, it's the tails that get fancy. At the same time, western birds are consistently dealing with harsher food conditions and do not evolve a specialized mating system or fancy feathers, just as before. Early in the speciation process, when individuals from the isolated populations meet, our eastern and western birds readily mate. But as generations pass and the eastern males become fancier, the western females begin to find the eastern males' habitats foreign and surprising. But these traits are clearly not deal breakers. Even after 10,000 generations of geographic isolation, some other western females continue to find the male displays attractive. At this stage, the eggs she lays aren't viable because the separated populations have evolved too many genetic differences to be compatible. To review, in this kind of speciation, geographic barriers have split the habitat into 3 fragments, and on each of these fragments is a unique species that has evolved. What if the southern west slope erodes into a peninsula, allowing southern eastern birds to mix with the western birds? By this time, their mating systems are completely different, and the two species can't create fertile, viable offspring. Now, related species can coexist, but because they no longer successfully interbreed, there is no going back. So how did 39 birds of paradise species evolve from one crow-like ancestor? In New Guinea and the surrounding islands where birds of paradise evolved, they have changed dramatically through geologic time, repeatedly isolating populations over thousands of generations. In isolation, natural and sexual selection have morphed and fragmented populations into a wonderful array of colourful species. The process of speciation is ongoing, and split after split, new and unique organisms evolve. Incredibly, all those 10,000 bird species we see today evolved from one single bird ancestor, and it's thanks to the evolutionary processes driving speciation that our planet is home to such an impressive biodiversity. So there you have it. What is speciation? That is the question you should be able to answer by the end of this unit. You should be able to remake that video using all of these key terms to explain them. to make that video in so much more detail to fully understand how and why we have such biodiversity on our planet. So I hope you look forward to this topic as much as I do. I'll catch you in class.